Charlie? Thank you. Thank you. And let me now, as Jaldi badal rahe hain. Mannat, can we have the panel on the stage? नहीं ये ऊपर कुछ नहीं ऊपर प्लीज and please move from here. Hi, please settle down and let me. Shashi, you'll have to either go inside. Shashi, you'll have to leave the room. There's too much happening. Thank you. And can I request you all to settle down? Thanks. Now with that, let me hand it over to Cecile Fruman, Director, Regional Integration and Engagement, South Asia, World Bank. And she is going to lead us through the next 15 minutes or so. Cecile, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samir. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. We're going to be talking about harnessing commerce, connectivity, and creativity in the subcontinent from mountain to ocean. So quite an agenda, and thank you for joining us for this journey. As Samir said, I'm Cecile Fruman. I'm the Director for Regional Integration Cooperation South Asia at the World Bank. And at the World Bank, we believe very much that regional integration and cooperation is a key for inclusive growth, for sustainable development, and for building a resilient South Asia. This is the only session in this Raisina program where we're focusing on South Asia, and we have a very distinguished panel of South Asian experts. And we'll be looking at how South Asia can integrate within the region and also connect to the rest of the region. South Asia, as many of you know, is one of the least integrated regions of the world, and there are really great potentials for further integration. Intra-regional trade is at only 5% of total trade, and that's about a third of the overall potential. Our World Bank studies and estimates show that regional integration could increase annual intra-regional trade by $44 billion. It could expand hydropower and clean energy capacity threefold by 2040. And it could help to build a climate resilient South Asia for over 800 million vulnerable people in this region. We believe that as the region embarks in its post-COVID recovery and continues to strengthen growth, regional integration is key to help build a green, clean, inclusive development and recovery. So one of the key areas of cooperation is digital connectivity and digital economy. This is a region that has made incredible strides in digital development in the past 10 years. Mobile subscriptions have increased to provide internet access to millions. The use of digital payments is on the rise. Digital ID systems improve the delivery of public, financial, and other services. And there's also booming IT industry and an innovative private sector that illustrates the potential for digital innovation and entrepreneurship in this region. Yet, we know that there are also many challenges in this area. Challenges of inclusion, of access, of governance, privacy and data protection. So the countries of South Asia have new and exciting opportunities to work together and with the rest of the world to reap the benefits and to mitigate some of these risks. And I'd like to flag to you a new World Bank report that we've just issued called South Asia's Digital Opportunity. We do have a few copies at the back of the room, and this is really what's anchoring our conversation today. We've looked at opportunities at the country level and also what the region can do together to help advance this agenda in terms of connectivity, in terms of data flows and e-payments. So today's focus is really on what are these opportunities, what are some of the challenges, and how does South Asia come together to overcome and reap the full benefits. To do so, we have a very eminent panel, and I'll introduce them. We have Ms. Aminat Shauna, who's the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Technology from the Maldives. To my right, Ambassador Vijay Mohan Quatra, Ambassador to Nepal and Designate Foreign Secretary. Congratulations, sir. Mr. Biswa Pudel, who is Vice Chairman of the National Planning Commission in Nepal. Mr. Ambassador Shahidul Haq, who's the former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh and is currently a Senior Fellow at the South Asian Institute of Policy and Government at the North-South University in Bangladesh. Welcome. And Mr. Tsering Sige Dorji, who's the former CEO of the Thimphu Tech Park, which was Bhutan's first and only IT tech park. So without further ado, I'm going to start with ladies first. I'll start with Aminat, and I'll ask you to talk a little bit about the role of digital in the COVID-19 recovery. So what we've seen in this region is that recovery has been slow and rather uneven across the region. But certainly what the pandemic has done is that it has amplified the use of digital technologies and services, but also exposed the gaps in its access and its usage. So tell us a little bit about how South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries working together can tap the potential of digitalization, and in particular, what does this mean for the Maldives?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here to particularly speak on something that's very dear to South Asia. As you've rightly mentioned, COVID-19 taught us an important lesson. We stayed at home, and yet we moved mountains. We developed vaccines. We moved hospital beds from countries to countries. We imported and exported medicines that were critical to save lives. All of this we did staying at home, using digital services to make sure that we continue to implement our development agendas. South Asia is nearly over 2 billion people. We are a region of very young people as well. In the Maldives, more than 40% of our population is under the age of 40. So these are critical components for us to really utilize to enhance our development priorities, increase our resilience, to further our relationship within countries. From systems in South Asia, from Aadhaar system to the Union Digital Service Centers, I think South Asia has really demonstrated advanced technologies that could be scaled up throughout other countries as well. I think what we need now is to move from a whole of government approach to maybe a whole of South Asia approach, and break in the barriers to eliminate silos that exists in our countries, to be able to learn from each other, peer-to-peer knowledge sharing on what we can do. And I think countries like the Maldives stand to benefit from India, from Bangladesh, who have really utilized and who have really implemented advanced technological solutions to provide services that are critical to our development.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to Biswo for Nepal, which is a landlocked country where you also experience high broadband costs. So what do you see as the key challenges, but also the opportunities for digital transformation, and how can working with your neighbors help support this effort?
Thanks, Cecile. I think we have very high cost. In terms of challenge, the cost is a function of many things. We have many taxes, royalties, VAT, very high VAT, and also we import a lot of broadband services. So that all leads to high cost. That's one challenge. Another challenge is actually overall limited access to internet. Your report also talks about only 5% of the population having access to broadband, maybe 13% of household having a laptop, stuff like that. So that itself limits our access to internet. So this will again limits the dissemination of internet services. These are the major challenges in popularizing broadband connection. Regarding the opportunities, I think there will be many opportunities. Obviously, increasing the productivity in a country like ours, landlocked country, the internet connection will actually present that opportunity first. And also, excuse me, also the technological leapfrogging opportunity that it brings. Using internet can be helpful on that. We have century of lack of education, so which we can actually overcome by leapfrogging, by using internet connection, internet technology and other things to produce new things, apps and other things that we have done. So that may be useful in terms of opportunities. In terms of collaboration with neighbors, I think we can collaborate with a country like India, which is our immediate neighbor, in reducing cost of connectivity. That will be a major thing in popularizing these connections and making our internet products cost effective. Yes, thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks. So Shahid, turning now to Bangladesh and BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. We're seeing a lot of positive momentum towards collaboration. How do you see the countries coming together, and where do you see the opportunities for doing more in terms of digital connectivity?
Thank you very much. I think you have rightly pointed out that the South Asian countries, in particular the countries around the Bay of Bengal, have been working out, which you mentioned, the BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, kind of a connectivity initiative, which is primarily a sort of a physical connectivity, both in terms of roads, railways, and the riverine. But within that, when the BIMSTEC or SARC was defining the connectivity, it did took into consideration in a large extent about the digital connectivity. And in this, Bangladesh has pioneered. Our Prime Minister Sheikh Raisina sort of made a commitment to the nation in 2009 after coming to the power, that Bangladesh would be made digital, and which to a large extent has brought a substantive change in the life and livelihood of the people of Bangladesh. Now, certainly there was a progress, but the COVID has, I think, brought a huge thrust and accelerated use of the digital communications. Now, it has sort of both the brighter side and the weaker side, because it also creates inequality if not properly governed. So that's one of the priorities of the government, was to make sure that it gets into the life and livelihood of the people who are on the margin, both geographically and otherwise. So that's there. But if you talk about the sort of both Bay of Bengal or South Asia wise, then you will see that any kind of a connectivity, and you have pointed out in your opening statement that it is the least connected region, if you talk globally, with less than 5% of trade, despite having the long history of SARC and the other organizations. It continued to remain bilateral. So that's something we need to look at, that why it is so, why there isn't a kind of a mindset, both at the policy level and the people level and the business level, to do more things regionally and some of the business in the state and look beyond this region. So that's the other issue. But I'm sure there will be opportunities to talk about how we sort of break the barrier. And one way that we can break the barriers is to use digital means. Then we overcome a lot of physical barrier. And that we have seen during the COVID period, it's possible. But in this, I think it is primarily not the government, but market needs to play a major role in terms of making connectivity a big force of development. Thank you.
Great. So when we look at Bhutan, tell us a little bit, Sige, about how digital services are helping to unleash entrepreneurship and creativity in Bhutan, and how do you see the role for the region to come together to support digital entrepreneurship at the regional level?
Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be on this panel with the highly esteemed co-panelists. Beneath the Shangri-La image as a tourist destination, Bhutan is a very progressive, democratic constitutional monarchy. We are well rooted in our past, but we have our eyes fully set on the future. And we are guided by our development philosophy of gross national happiness, which was expounded in the 1970s by our fourth king. Gross national happiness is all about balance between spiritual or mental well-being and material progress, and between preserving our age-old values and harnessing the power of emerging technologies. The drive towards technology adoption and digital transformation in Bhutan is spearheaded by none other than by His Majesty the King himself. Being a small nation makes us a smart nation. Technology is an indispensable tool that will be necessary to realize this aspiration, said His Majesty the King in an address to a group of young graduates in 2019. This push has naturally brought about great dividends, both for the youth as well as the public in general. And this has helped unleash creativity and entrepreneurship, as Cecil has asked. It has been found that the youth are interested more in digital jobs as compared to other jobs in the agriculture or construction sector. They are the digital natives, and they see technology differently than we do. As a result of these initiatives from the government side, there has been a number of Bhutanese youth who have started entrepreneurship in the digital space. There is some growing digital entrepreneurs despite the small market size, and there is also a growing number of Bhutanese creators and influencers on social media like Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. In fact, I just found out that there is a YouTube channel started by one of the Bhutanese youth. That channel has more views than the channel of the national television station. So there's the power of technology that we can see. And at the tech park, we have been able to generate employment opportunities for more than 600 people since 2016. So these are some of the visible results that we can see despite being a very small market and a country with a small population. Now, quickly going to the second part of the question on regional collaboration, I feel that there are a lot of opportunities, and I feel these opportunities are not fully tapped. Just to give an example of what can be done, just before the COVID situation started in 2020, it was from 28th to 29th of February 2020, the first Bhutan-India Startup Summit was organized in Bhutan. which saw a number of entrepreneurs from both Bhutan and India participate. It was a very vibrant event. And now it has just been 2 years, and it seems that, the things are going back to normal as we used to know, despite all the changes. I feel that this kind of, events can happen more, and it can happen between more countries in the region. We have a shared legacy and a shared, cultural heritage. Given that background, anything we start on top of that, I think, can go a very long way. We can take advantage of these multilateral groupings like SARC, BIMSTEC, or BBIN to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Quatra, turning to you, we've heard a lot now from your fellow panelists about the opportunities for digital connectivity within South Asia, BBIN, and also the broader Indo-Pacific. What do you see as other areas of potential collaboration?
Thank you very much. I do apologize, I'm a bit of a last-minute imposter in the panel. I was not supposed to be here, but thank you very much. I think it has been quite interesting listening to my fellow panelists in terms of how they see the entire space of regional cooperation in the digital arena. In my view, whatever flows out of partnerships in this space is still a very limited horizon if you look at it in the overall rubric of connectivity. It's definitely a new domain in the terms of the way economies of the Indian subcontinent and the larger regions cooperate with each other in a manner that actually extends its benefit to the people, to the economy. I think it's quite incipient in that stage. But I think if you look at, its prospects, number one. Number two, the speed at which it is growing. Three, the directions in which it is growing. And I say this returning very fresh from Nepal, based on also my experience in Nepal, is actually quite amazing and promising. So, if you were to categorize this into different specific segments in which actually the businesses in each country of South Asia, even I would say wider concentric circle of countries in other parts, in other regions, if you were to look at it, you will find that you can actually divide them into several categories and not just limited to some of the opportunities which have been mentioned by the previous panelist. So I think the first area in which it is actually very promising is the platform-based digital cooperation. So now this sounds very techie-tech, but what it essentially does is that you can have one platform in entire South Asia in which one country of the region can either market its product, service, even share its experiences with another country of South Asia. So, I'll give you a classic example in Nepal. There is the two platforms, one in Nepal, one in India, have come together in a manner in which Indian product can be sold in Nepal, Nepalese product can be sold in India. The supply chains are easily interconnected. So all you do is intersect the two platforms into a cooperative opportunity, which is a specific business-related opportunity that you can use. Two, it is leading to the emergence of popularity rather of and usage of new products. So give you, for example, in the area of finance, and I think Dr. Paudel from Nepal can perhaps comment much better on it. The platforms of NPCI, the National Payment Council of India, in partnership with entities in Nepal, for example, are now allowing the use of app-based payment structures to be interoperable between the two countries, which is a remarkable convenience for anybody who's traveling from India to Nepal and from Nepal to India. It's a product, it's also a service, it also connects, and connects remarkably well, actually, if you look at it. Three, most recently, which is again possible essentially through the digital space, is the launch of RuPay card. It's a kind of a credit stroke debit card. I think the current stage is that it has been launched in Bhutan, for example, and most recently in Nepal. Again, the digital platform allows you to take one particular product and spread it all across the region, again, for the benefit of the people connecting it better. I think the second thing which the digital connectivity does is brings about enormous system efficiencies for trade. So there are large network of physical infrastructure connectivity between the two countries, any two countries in the region. Cross-border train networks, railroad networks, airways, in case of couple of countries in the region, even inland waterways. These are all physical infrastructure-based connectivity partnerships, which have become far more efficient using the digital processes and the digital hardware which goes into that system. So the system efficiencies that the digital space brings about in the space of physical infrastructure, which then directly benefits the economy. But I think the larger point, which is point both of principle but also of practice on the ground, I think which needs to be kept in mind is that ultimately the space of digital connectivity has to be placed in the overall rubric of overall connectivity between the countries of the region. And I think in that space, what we need to keep in mind is that whatever initiatives we launch, this is irrespective of the space really, one, have to be financially responsible, two, have to be economically viable, and naturally have to be extremely mindful of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity concerns of the countries involved. And I say this because in the end, connectivity per se, irrespective of the domain in which you practice, is meant for the benefit of the people. And I think if you follow these principles and practice them actually on the ground, not only would you have a more efficient connectivity partnership, in this case digital, but you will also have these partnerships being widely accepted across the population in pretty much most of the region. My colleague from Bhutan talked about the startup initiative. I think that's another offshoot of the digital connectivity partnerships, which is that the entire rapidly growing innovation space in India, the startup space in India, both in terms of products, in terms of services, again in terms of platforms, is actually spreading very rapidly across the region, and purely through private mechanisms. For example, in Nepal, there have been at least 3 iterations of what we call as global conclaves, in which what we try to do is bring together small, successful IT-enabled services startups in India and the prospective partners, at least in this case in Nepal. I'm sure this is a template which can easily be replicated across other countries too. Bring them together, they look at product services, they use the digital medium, find a solution, enter into a commercial-based agreement, and move on with life, really. So I think the overall, this is a very promising space. It's also the space which Minister Shauna mentioned about the region being very young in population. It connects intuitively with their aspirations, it's their comfort zone. Let me put it across this way. So I think, all in all, something of great promise. Yes, there are challenges, particularly relating to the, I would say, speed of connectivity in some ways. Also in terms of the cost of the bandwidth which goes across. But I think it is equally important to keep in mind sometimes that whatever bandwidths, networks, speeds you operate, they eventually have to be safe and secure bandwidth and networks also. You would not want to partner with the networks in a manner where what you put out in terms of your data and other aspects of it is actually compromising that. So you need to be very sure that if you are moving on a network, if your financial details are moving on a network, the network is safe and secure and trusted, and that's it. I think there also India offers a phenomenal opportunity in terms of extending whatever capacities are available with us, with the region at large, so that when we grow together as a region, we grow together not just in terms of economic prosperity, but also in a manner which is safe and secure, at least in the digital space. I think let me stop here. I'm sure there will be questions on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I do have more questions for the panel, but I also want to give an opportunity to our audience to come in. So we have a few mics in the room. If you'd like to line up and prepare your questions, now would be the time. And I see that we already have a few questions in the back. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Am I audible?
And please introduce yourself also. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Riya Sinha from the Center for Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi. I have two questions for Mr. Dorji. First, do you see the gross national happiness and connectivity as contradictory? Because as exemplified by Bhutan not taking up the recent BBI and MVA, that sort of indicates in that direction. My second question to you is, how do you see social media growth and penetration in Bhutan? Is it changing the traditional social and political setup in the society? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take another couple.
Good
Yes,
evening.
please go ahead.
My name is Diego Llosa. I'm from Peru. I'm a young Raisina young fellow. And for me, this session is very interesting because there are many challenges that are shared between the Latin American region, but also South Asia. And even though we are far distant, we share challenges with respect to connectivity, digital economy, and in part is explained because of the geography and the transaction costs. But I see that in Latin America there are several initiatives, regional initiatives within Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance that are trying to work with regard to the single window, infrastructure, etc., to improve connectivity, to improve digital economy between our economies. So my question is to any of the speakers willing to respond it. Do you think there is a scope for mutual cooperation between Latin America and South Asia in this regard, like South-South cooperation between regional organizations such as SARC with Mercosur or Pacific Alliance, or cooperation, bilateral cooperation or cooperation between regional organizations? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's take one more over here.
Good evening, I'm Maitreyi Naidu. I'm an officer trainee with the MEA. My question is, we have seen that those who set the rules have benefited from the rules. And given that South Asia is the largest market for digital technologies, whether, and if yes, how can South Asian countries come together to create a system of rules for trade in digital technologies, digital products and services, as well as digital security, which can then be scaled up and accessed and accepted by the rest of the world? Thank you.
All right, so CA, there were a couple questions for you at the beginning. Do you want to take those?
Yeah. So there were two questions directed at me. Thank you for the questions. First one was whether I see GNH, gross national happiness, philosophy and connectivity as contradictory. I don't. I am an engineer by background, and I see technology as a tool. And any tool can be used either for good or bad. So as long as we make a very conscious choice of how to use the technology, including connectivity, I think we can use technology for good. And while this balancing act can be challenging, I think they need not be contradictory, and I feel that technology can be used to enhance GNH. On the second question on social media and its impact on the, I think, political and social setup, traditional political and social setup, social media is very powerful. It definitely has a lot of influence and a lot of impact, especially on the young people. And now, the social media is, I think, one of the strongest media, I think, in many countries, and now it is becoming so even in Bhutan. So there is definitely a big impact, and I think how we make a conscious choice of minimizing the negative impact is really up to us. And I think we can only learn as we go along, so we don't have a silver bullet to overcome the negative impacts, I think, in advance. So we can learn as we go, and I think we can minimize the negative impacts and use this as a tool for the good rather than for the bad. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn now to anyone on the panel who'd like to respond to the two other questions. Cooperation between South Asia and Latin America and the rules-based system for trade. Who would like to go? Ambassador? No, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think first to the question of our young friend from Peru with regard to cooperation between Latin America and South Asia. Let me give you an example, which is a concrete example, which uses the digital platform-based engagement to advance cooperation in a non-digital space, but extremely important, not in itself, but also in terms of its derivative impact on the climate change. And that's about the cooperation in the solar space. So, for example, if you look at the International Solar Alliance, the Secretariat of the International Solar Alliance, what it does for you is it provides a platform, essentially, for global collation of solar-based technologies, practices, SOPs, which can then be shared among the membership of the International Solar Alliance through this medium with effectively zero cost. A classic example of a platform being used to extend the best practices, the technology solutions in an energy space which is also climate friendly. I'll give you another example, and a lot of this actually has come through during the last couple of years of COVID-19 that the world has gone through, which I would call digital connectivity as a solution to the crisis, for example. So we have, and I'm sure the rest of South Asia also, has built platform-based solutions which are easily replicable, easily scalable to any other part of the world, including Latin America. Of course, there is a language interface involved, which is not a problem because the source code for most of these apps is actually freely available. One of the things which at least we have tried to do in India is make whatever solutions we come out in the digital space for public benefit, make them human-centric in order so that the source code which goes behind or the groundwork which goes behind in creating that particular platform is freely available to the rest of the societies, not just in South Asia, but across the world, anywhere to be used. These are two of the examples. There are several other examples. But the specific answer, I think, to your question is yes, there is a remarkable opportunity in the digital space because that's the unique nature of this particular area, which is that it allows you to bridge the geographies at effectively no extra cost. And the language of 0 and 1 is common to whether it's Latin America or it's India or South Asia. To the second question of the young lady here with regard to the standards, I think it's a very important question. I think something which, since we are by nature as an average person perhaps not highly security conscious, tend to maybe view it, measure it lightly, but I think it's a very serious issue. That's why towards the end of my remarks I pointed to the need of having safe, stable, secure and trusted source when you operate in the digital space. And as you transition from 4G to 4G plus, which I think most of the economies, at least in South Asia, are transitioning to, and then from 4G plus to 5G, and then from 5G to 6G, this importance of having a trusted technology base which relies on standards will become extremely important. And I think this is something where the countries of the South Asia need to come together to ensure that the platforms they use, the networks on which their data flows are safe, secure and trusted. Because once you move to 5G, you will no longer be able to control, have a full control over your, over the data that flows on those infrastructures, simply because the standards for those would not be in your control. That's the very nature of 5G. You can control the standards at which you provide the services, but if the standards on which the hardware is built is not in your control, frankly, you will have no control over the services beyond a point. You might have a limited degree of control. So I think something very important, something definitely a space for all of us to look at collectively. Individually, we are. In India, for example, there is a very acute focus on this particular area, that the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the hardware infrastructure, and even the embedded software in it on which your data flows is absolutely safe, secure, and in your control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Would you like to add?
Thank you very much. While I fully agree with the distinguished ambassador from India, but very good question from our colleague about the rules. That reminds us that technology is also not politically neutral and a value neutral. And that's, I think, coming quite strongly in the global politics. So both in terms of production, use, and subsequent consequences of technology and digital in this particular question needs rules. Rules to make sure that it doesn't become a tool of exploitation, number one. Rules so that everybody knows as to what is expected when they're using the digital space. So in that, it reminds us that when the trade rules were being set up, negotiated, post World War 60s, 70s, 80s, before the WTO came into being, there was a lot of discussions where most of the developing countries were in the margin of the debate. So I'm sure that this time around, the developing countries would also play a critical role in setting rules, norms for both production, use, and managing the consequences of digital world, which is not easy because of strong presence of market, and market normally runs by its own philosophy, which not essentially and not always favors the people that the distinguished ambassador has been mentioned, also state. So there needs to be a platform where these things could be broadly discussed. These are being discussed both in the international organization, WTO, WIPO, ITO, and other places. But I think regionally we should also have a platform where we can also then spell out as to what is that we need out of the new rules that's in the making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to turn to our panelists to see if they want to share any final concluding remarks, anything that this conversation has spurred that you'd like to share with us.
Thanks, Cecile.
Go ahead.
I think the last question was really important. I agree with both ambassadors on their comment. but also I think we need to be mindful about, when we talk about setting our own rules. Some countries have, tried to develop their own digital platforms, set their own rules, and it has led to, let's say, increasing, autocratic tendency within those countries also. So it may not necessarily, when you reject the integration with the rest of the world, you may be asserting your independence, but by choosing not to be in the Committee of Nations or, whatever it is, we may also be isolating a certain part of, population, and that could be disastrous. So a lot of these things, when we try to rewrite the rules of engagement, we have to be mindful of that.
That's great. Thank you. Aminat, any final thoughts?
For the session?
For the session. We only have a minute and 10 seconds left.
Well, I wanted to mention something that's very important and close to my heart as well. How can we use technology for monitoring of what's happening in our country because of the impacts of climate change? We are 1,200 islands, and the most drastic changes that we are seeing because of climate change is coastal erosion, increased flooding, and unpredictable weather. We could use available technology to address all of these, using satellite technology and drone technology to monitor coastal erosion, for us to be able to use data-driven policy decision-making. Also using technology for early warning systems and using wave modeling technology for us to be able to predict flooding is critical. So as a country that is battling climate change, also an island nation, which is also a very large ocean state, we can't develop without the use of technology and integrating data in a safe cyberspace. This is critical, and how could we use this at a regional scale is the question that we are trying to address, and I think we stand to benefit as a cooperation, as a regional bloc, when we work together, because the issues that we face are very similar in all our countries, from mountains to the oceans as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I gave you the first word, and I'll give you the last. We're going to wrap up this session, and I think you'll agree with me that this has been a very good illustration of the potential for digital development and digital economy. I think we've heard from each country how it can spur development, how it can spur recovery, and also how important it is for countries in this region to cooperate, to come together, to build common platforms, common solutions, and also to branch out and work with other parts of the continent and the Indo-Pacific and beyond. So also this contains challenges, clear challenges in terms of equity, inclusion, accessibility, and we talked a lot about the importance of trust, the importance of safeguarding privacy, and the governance of data. So it's a tall agenda, but I really want to thank my fellow panelists for your wonderful remarks, and to our audience for being with us. I'm sure there were many more questions that we just didn't have time to entertain, but hopefully you'll find opportunities to interact with our panelists outside of this session. Thank you all very much, and I wish you all good proceedings with the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now take a break and be back in 10 minutes for the next conversation. Thank you very much, and please join us for a photograph at the top of the stage. Cecile, can I request you for a photograph with the entire group? Thanks.